I'm curious, why do some, or maybe all people that have a near death experience say that their intuition, their intuitiveness, their psychic abilities are enhanced or activated? Well, today we're going to talk with Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, who's a chiropractor and a healer, talking about her terrible car accident, having a near death experience, and coming back to realize her previous skills of communicating with those in the spirit world have become so much more. Have you had that experience? Well, today we're going to talk about it, and I hope you share your own stories. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley.
Hello.
Hello. As Mrs. Doubtfire would say, hello.
Hello. Listen, I'm trying to suppress my 80s girl impulse to go, sweet.
You can if you want to, because it's not that I haven't heard it before.
8 million times. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I know, it's like me and the Waltons jokes.
Right, right. Mary Ellen. Good night, Mary Ellen. I'll probably say that as we close tonight. So
Yeah, of course you will.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. I always enjoy talking about near-death experiences, and I think many of us, the probably 0.89 billion people on this planet, I mean, it's inevitable that we are going to die. I mean, they always say you can't get out of taxes and you can't get out unless you're a church, or death. And but the one thing with near-death experience, I mean, it's such a fascination. You know, you have your atheists, you have your different religions, and every single one has their own beliefs. And I've told this story a billion times to the people that are tuning in. I'm sorry, but you've heard this before. But my grandfather experienced a near-death experience in the 60s before I was born, and I remember him telling me about it. And it was the standard. I saw a light. I went through the light. I saw my mother. She said it wasn't my time. And I came back. And of course, when he told me, I was very young, but I am very fascinated with near-death experience because now I'm 51. I'm halfway through or more than halfway through my life. And you start thinking about your own mortality. And one of my parents is gone. My dad's getting up there, 86. And so, death does kind of revolve around us. And so for the people that have not heard of you, or maybe have heard of you but not really know your story, do you mind just sharing this story so we can kind of get into this mindset of where you were at the near death, and then now where are you at today?
Yeah, well, I had just finished 4 years of college, and in the good old days in the South, if you were dating somebody when you were graduating from college, you kind of moved towards their hometown, and your
Right.
mom was cooking out the china and
Right.
so I was dating somebody who was from Charleston, South Carolina, and I ended up, because I'm originally from Virginia, and I ended up moving to Charleston and kind of starting my after college life there. And, I had my big fat college degrees, and I was basically mopping floors in a sign company. And it was the Christmas after I had just graduated, and I was on my way to the company Christmas party, and it was Charleston. It was hot. I was in shorts and a t-shirt,
Right.
and I came to a traffic light on a major highway 17, and I was sitting at my red light, for the entire cycle of the light. And then when my light turned green, I was going to have to cross several lanes of traffic in order to turn left to go towards town.
Mm-hmm.
So I got across the first couple of lanes and then get to the last lane, and I look, and there is this car that is obviously intending to blow through the red light.
Oh, no.
And it is barreling towards me. And it was in that moment that I just went, oh, I'm getting ready to die. And it was so funny because there was no kind of, attached to it. It was, just very matter of fact. And in that moment of recognition, what was so bizarre was that everything just slowed down. everything just slowed down to a snail's pace. And I literally had all the time in the universe to decide how I was going to experience this death, as in differently than the other deaths.
Right. So
Now,
you're like,
remember,
oh, this has happened before.
yes. And what's so bizarre is I'm a preacher's daughter from the
Mm.
South. You know, we didn't talk about other lifetimes or having lived more than once or anything like that. And so this is an entirely new concept to me. And in that moment, though, it was just like I'd known it forever.
Hmm.
And so, what was so amazing about this is that I'm deciding as everything is just kind of slowly happening around me, gosh, I've done this before.
Hmm.
Oh, that's right, I've done this before. So I had two options. One was to stay in the body and feel the impact and then die, and one was to exit the body, witness the impact, and be dead. So I was dying either way. And it was very clearly in that moment my choice how I wanted to leave. And this was just, when you think about it now, it's just mind blowing because, I completely was in control of the situation. And
Hmm.
so this is where it's so important for people who've lost a loved one or, you've lost somebody through tragic
Right.
circumstances, or somebody's been murdered or somebody has died in horrific circumstances. It's the same across the board. And when you get to that moment, no matter what appearances seem to us here, that manipulation of time begins to take place.
Right.
And so the person who is incarnate, who's getting ready to leave the body behind, is in complete 100% control of how that is going to take place. And they're going to extract, they're going to be used up and take up every last drop as they go through that process. And so this is why, people spend a lifetime grieving and mourning tragic deaths and
Right.
wrongful circumstances and all. And so what I try to explain to them, if you can even picture somebody who's being shot and that bullet just literally slowing down, the concept of the bullets, the slow bullets in the movie The Matrix
Mm-hmm.
is
That.
not by accident.
Yeah.
Exactly, because it actually, that's somebody who had a firsthand experience of what that actually looks like. Those of us who write books and I've just finished writing a screenplay and all that, those of us who've been through these experiences, that's where these stories come from. What you think is so crazy and so wild, it's because somebody in that team has seen this
Right.
and was able to accurately describe it that way. And so that is a very real representation. You just kind of sit there and everything slows down. All right, what you going to do here? And in my case, I felt like I had been there and done that so many times before that it was going to be far more valuable to me to come out of the body actually prior to the impact. So what was so crazy, Tony, was I'm now witnessing my own death.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not like dead and
Interesting.
knocked out of the body. I am out of the body before death hits. And that it was utterly incredible because my life's work now, you're 51, I'm 52. I've spent a tremendous amount of time in my adult life pursuing frequency and sound.
Right.
Because in the early days when I came back from this accident and my abilities to communicate outside of this realm or my ability to manipulate energy in order to help somebody change their biology, I started to play around with the idea that, wait a second, am I able to do this because I'm just so special? Or am I able to do this
Right.
because I have figured out how to work with my true essence? And hang on a second, if I can work with that, can't everybody else? Isn't there a way to make this available to everybody else? Because any healer worth their salt is looking for the end goal of empowering an individual to know that it is they who are healing themselves. It's all coming from within. Everything that can move them forward, everything that can provide the ultimate experience
Right.
while here incarnate is coming from them. So that's why I always, we say it's easier on the business card healer, but really I'm a window washer. You're literally just wiping the windows clean so that
Right.
people can see out for themselves and and get their own big aha without having to die.
Right. Can I ask you this? You said you had a choice. Why do some people have choices? And like my grandfather, some people did not have choice. They said it's not your time because he didn't say it's not your time, but you can stay if you want to. So why do you think that is?
Well, the interesting thing is when if you want to go really deep on that and you
Right.
want to talk about the fact that we're actually fractals of the same whole, those beings that I encountered, those voices that tell your grandfather that it's not his time, who is it? Only some projection of himself saying, "Get back in there, sunshine. You're not done."
Got
You
it.
know,
Got
that's
it.
that's how I'd answer that. And I've been on the circuit with so many different people who have had near death experiences, and a lot of people who were truly ticked off about having to come back
I've
in,
heard that too.
and what's so interesting is watching how their lives unfold and the way the patterns that they express and the the issues that remain current in their lives post near death experience. And it's interesting because you can nearly pick out personality types and how they were going to experience the process. Um, but I really believe that is how it happens differently. Is what's out there the same for all of us? Sure. But I could go see a movie with you, Tony, and we could see the same movie,
Hmm.
and you could walk out and go, "That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen." And I could be like, "Oh my God, I loved it. It was amazing. Did you
Right.
not see all of And
Right.
we have two completely different experiences of the exact same thing.
Right. And yeah, I mean that's just human nature. I mean, it's religion, people of different color, different countries, we all have that different, oh, that person's bad, oh no, you're bad, and then back and forth. But no, over here we think you all are great. um well, I think it's fascinating because like I said, my mother passed away 2.5 years ago, and before she passed away, she was always talking about seeing her mother, who she never met, um and seeing people coming into the room, but nobody was there, like when she would look around. Before your accident, even though you weren't ill or sick, did you have any inclination or any premonition that something was going to happen, or was this kind of a complete accident surprise?
Not of the actual accident. My entire life had been full of premonitions.
Right.
Again, I was such the challenge for my parents. I did not fit in their box whatsoever because um, I had been before I even got out of the womb. My mom and dad had been told that I wasn't going to be okay.
Oh, wow.
She had rubella when she was pregnant with me in her first trimester, and so
Right.
they were just like, "Look," and they were old. They were both in their 40s,
Oh, wow.
and so they were like, "This is not working out okay. You need to go home, get your head around this." And so, what was really interesting is that my father, the minister, somewhere in the midst of this pregnancy, has what he called, his words were, a celestial visit.
Really?
Now, we thought this was so funny because, you know, I'm like, "Dad, are these angels? What are we talking about here?" And he goes, "Well, if they were sugar, they didn't have wings." And it was my father's way of trying to say some being not of this world came to see him, and well, actually there were two,
Interesting.
and that he was told in no uncertain terms that not only would his baby girl be okay, but that she was going to come in with some enhanced abilities. Now, so you have to think, like, you're born 1970, I'd say, right? I'm
69.
69.
Right.
And so there was there wasn't any ultrasound, we're not
No.
having baby reveals back then.
Right.
And so what was so crazy was they said I was a girl, and they also said I was going to have these abilities. So sure enough, I'm born and there's nothing wrong. Like, the doctors are floored. And so then my parents are kind of going, huh. And they're waiting all through my childhood, my early childhood. They're kind of going, they're waiting for that shoe to drop,
Right.
because these celestial beings are like, she's going to be able to do some weird stuff. And so
Right.
it's about when I was 4, I had what I tell everybody, I call it the kitchen table talk. And as a minister, my dad was also a world champion bodybuilder, so he was
Oh,
just this,
wow.
he was this gigantic
Right.
man of God,
Right.
but
Right.
he had this big booming voice. And he called me and he sat down there and he said, "Sugar, do you know the difference between alive and dead?" I'm 4,
Oh my
right?
God.
And I'm like, and my mom's kind of like nervously, using the dishcloth on something, she's like, ah. And so I'm like, I don't know, because I don't really know what he means. And so it turns out that my very best friend in the world was my grandfather, my mom's dad, Dr. Garland Clark. And like, I talked about Judge, that was his nickname, Judge, all the time, and we did stuff together. And he was just always there for me, from my earliest memories are of Judge.
Hmm.
And so I'm talking about, oh, Judge said this and Judge did that. And so, my father is now finally unraveled by the time I'm 4. And he has to sit me down. And so that's where this question comes from, because it turns out that Judge had died when I was 1.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so I'm coming in and I'm saying things that both my parents know that only Judge could have told me, and there's no other way I could know them, but they can't figure out how I know them.
Right.
And so, I mean, he was just a presence. And so, what was really funny is having that knowing at that age that the world as we see it isn't all there is.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm now being told at 4 that the way I'm looking at you through the screen right now, and I'm seeing you on this flat screen, I presume there's a 3D guy sitting on the other side
Right.
somewhere.
You never know.
But I'm still, you know, assuming that you're real,
Right.
and that we're talking and all. And so the way that I would speak to Judge was very much like that. And the way he looked and presented, and he was as real to me as anybody else that was in my life. He just was different. I knew that when I went downstairs and I watched Happy Days, I know that Ralph and Potsy were real guys somewhere,
Right. Right.
and I interacted and they were very much a part of my life. And, so it was, that's the best way I can kind of describe that. And so, it was really, really interesting growing up with that kind of perception. And so as I got older, that was when kind of the prophetic dreams. My mother was only saying the other night, somebody close to our family had died last week, and she was just laughing, and she was going through all of the eulogies that I helped my father write when I was a child. And we were just having a real laugh about it. And she's 92 now, and
Oh,
she's
wow.
fit as a
God
fiddle
bless her.
and in brilliant shape, and she's delighted because that was her father. And Judge
Mm-hmm.
was very much so part of my life. And while she was, yes, the preacher's wife, she was also Judge's daughter. And so she was only delighted that I was having these experiences, and that he continues to this day to be such a part of my experience.
So he still
Oh,
presents himself.
absolutely.
So
I'm
I was
not,
going to ask, because many times as children, we see things,
mhm.
and then of course society or age or whatever other distraction, we start not seeing these spirits,
Right.
beings, whatever you want to call them. What?
Yeah, but then I was dead.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. And that even made it more, yeah,
I kind of changed the game,
right, right.
you know.
She went.
Exactly.
She went to
So
heaven,
we were
Vegas.
just, we were reminiscing about the fact that, yeah, exactly. We were reminiscing about the fact that she's like, "Oh, do you remember so and so's eulogy?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember," because Dad would be sitting there. This memory is ingrained in my head of my father at the kitchen table and the yellow legal pad and a pen. And I remember in particular, he was working on somebody's eulogy, and he had been a very close friend of my father's, and dad just couldn't get the words. And so I'm eating my breakfast, and next thing, here's his friend, and he's talking away about stuff there's no way that I could know. And dad's just writing everything down. And so he's like penning the eulogy with his friend through me.
Oh, how fun. Wow.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
so
We
cool.
had a interesting household.
I always said people like that, it sounds like, Ghost, Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Without
who's
Henry VIII.
talking?
Yeah. So it was just it was pretty incredible, and so I would have prophetic dreams as a kid, and
Mhm.
then when I got to the awkward teenage years, of course you're doing everything not to be different than everyone. And so
Right.
I had been long told at this stage, we don't talk about this. Let's don't talk about this because other people won't understand. My dad didn't understand. That's
Right.
what he didn't want anybody exploiting or calling it not of God, or that was like
Mhm.
his worst nightmare. Oh my God,
Mhm.
it's Satan. And you know, it was really interesting. And so when I went off to college, I had these amazing gifts, and I was so trying to be normal and fit in with everybody there, that I just didn't, I would try and push him aside. And what would happen is it would interrupt my sleep. And so
Oh, wow.
that was when it was in those years that I became an insomniac. And I
Oh.
got into such a habit of not going to sleep because I'd always see things when I was asleep. And so if I stayed up and wandered the halls of the dorms, then, that wouldn't happen. And so I'd catnap, um, and
Right.
grab an hour here and there, like long, but it was still going to come if it was going to come.
Right.
But so that's kind of, um, I was a cheerleader, and my college roommate and I, we would get such a laugh. She's the only person I ever said it to out loud at that stage in my life. And she was like, "Okay, fruitcake." And
Right. Right.
but what we would do is we would write down the scores to the basketball game. I would have seen them and write it down and put it in an envelope and stick it in the underwear drawer and go off and cheer. And then everybody would come back to our place and crack open a beer and open the envelope, and there's the score. And
Wow.
that
Lottery
was
tickets.
literally the extent of my service to humanity at this stage, right? So it turns out after the accident that I had made an agreement with myself that I was coming in with these abilities, and if I didn't manage to make it to the literal adulthood stage of human life at 21,
Right.
that I was going to set up something that was going to either kill me or knock me on purpose. And so that's how that accident happens. It turns out I was the architect of my own accident.
Wow.
So,
And I've
or
heard that.
the architect of my own intervention.
Right. In fact, the other day, which I found interesting, how people will put questions on Facebook just to get interaction, and somebody says, "Do we really have free will?" And I think they're probably asking it more for political and stuff, but I took it as what we're talking about, the spirit world is, if when we die or how we die or choices we make, we get the opportunity to do free will. What do you think about free will when it comes to spirituality?
Oh, absolutely. It's so much less complicated than we actually make it. As strange as that sounds. You can go through all these multiple layers of trying to figure it out and work it out. And oh my God, how do the interdimensions work and what's going on? And really, what it boils down to at the end of the day is you, as again, a fractal of that whole,
Right.
come into this plane as you can multiple other planes to experience aspects of yourself that you couldn't as that whole. And that's what's so cool, because when you really have an understanding of that, and you're looking at the nearly 8 billion people that are on this planet, you are actually experiencing every possible scenario under the sun. And what's so interesting about us as human beings is, we can get really super passionate and
Oh yeah.
um but what's hysterical is that we think that whatever we're passionate about in the moment is what everybody else should be passionate about. And it's like I've just been at war with the Irish government for the last week over an absolute atrocity and injustice for a visitor that I had flying over here from Los Angeles. He's a 22-year-old kid who was coming over to stay with us for the summer. We absolutely love him dearly, and he was treated horrifically at immigration,
Hmm.
and he was deported. And
Wow.
yeah, for absolutely no reason, and truthfully, other than he was the only black kid on the plane. And so then he gets back in the other day, and he just sails right through because I'd been completely up in arms with the government there. And so at the same time that that's going on, and I'm fighting and I'm rallying the people of Ireland behind me, and we're like righting this wrong, you've got the whole Israel and Palestine thing going on.
Right.
And now and so people would come in and they would leave messages, as I was posting about what's going on. Well, what about Israel and Palestine? What about the homeless people? And we have this really funny way of thinking that just because we're focused on something that's actually there to help us develop,
Right.
grow, and evolve, that everybody else is in that same space. And
Yeah.
it's this really funny thing that we do as humans. And um, is the fact that I'm not giving that my undivided attention right now, does that mean that I support or condone what's happening there? Of course not. It means that that's not where my focal point is right
Mm-hmm.
now, because some aspect of me is actually there experiencing that on both sides of the fence.
Right. I
And so
agree.
when you can get that and it doesn't melt your circuits, and you actually just kind of own that vibe and you get that, y- there's nothing to worry about, because you realize that it is actually all free will.
Right.
That it's all by choice that we came here to experience those things simultaneously. And this is the kind of thing that can fry people's brains, because when I'm describing what that's like, life isn't just like this escalator up.
Right.
It's like, we're talking about other experiences and other dimensions, and why we actually come here to exercise that free will. It's like we're riding a merry-go-round. You've got things happening all along the view of that merry-go-round
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Right.
And that is very difficult for people to get their heads around, but it's also one of the most incredible aspects of my near-death experience. And so you imagine preacher's kid just sucked out of the body. I'm watching my own thing going, oh my God, how could I have forgotten this? And there's this tone and vibration going, which leads me to all of my life's work now of
Right.
discovering how to manipulate frequency, you know, and I get into this space, I meet my own beings that are there, and we go through a life review. And what is the most standout thing of the whole event for me is that I am reviewing my life, and I am 4 years old getting that kitchen table talk. I'm 17 years old in a gang rape. I am 12 years old winning Living History Day in junior high
Hmm.
school. I am 18 years old going to the prom. Do you know, in all of this in my review is happening at the exact same time. And so that was the most poignant thing for me, because it really helped explain this whole thing of parallel realities. I mean, we're literally living in the parallel reality. Like,
Right.
the idea that you're sitting where you are, and that I'm sitting where I am, and you're sitting in a male body and I'm sitting in a female body, and you're the one asking the questions and I'm the one answering them, is we're literally just a mirror reflection of one another, and that this is happening.
Right.
I'm hanging out with a really cool part of myself right now, you know
Right, right. And I
and
love
so
that. And I love that how you're saying this. And I know a lot of people I go back to religion a lot because I grew up in the Bible Belt, Kansas, Midwest, right? And we always, in the church form, we hear about heaven, and we hear about the streets of gold and the mansion in the sky and all this stuff. But a lot of people that have near-death experiences, and I've talked to many of them, don't speak of it that way. They talk how beautiful. I mean, it's more about the feeling, what they feel of than what they see. Can you talk about the difference between the two? Because like my grandpa, when he said he came out in the field, there was a stream, and he saw his mother on the other side. Do they appear to us in ways to where we are not shocked, scared, or how do they present it to us so we feel at home?
It all depends. It all depends on what we need in that moment.
Okay. Well, how was your experience? Was it just
because
beings?
Like, for instance, in my experience, I'm like, hang on a second, again, another Bible Belt kid here.
Right.
I'm like, where's Jesus?
Right.
Hang on, guys.
Where's
did anybody let him know I was coming?
Where's the throne? Where's the throne of God? Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, where are all the lambs?
Right.
This is crazy. And wait a second, I've got the weird beings here. What's going on here?
Right.
But, so I had that kind of experience. But one of my very, very favorite stories, and one of the things that was the most life-changing things for me, even having had this near-death experience and all, was an experience in my own father's death. And this was just prior to him passing a couple of months. And just like your grandfather, he had this event, he had this experience. And so my father, this very incredible orator, huge big man, like just
right,
walk the talk, and he was amazing. And he's reduced to babble, and he has Alzheimer's. And people would come, his friends and people who knew him, they come and stand at the door and cry. And it was just crazy and they're like, I can't believe this is so humiliating. And I'm like, no, it's not, guys. This is my dad getting the chance to experience part of life, because he was always so disciplined, and that's hard work. Yeah. Discipline is hard.
It's exhausting.
Work.
I'm disciplined in some
areas. I
don't
suffer from it.
No, that's me either. That's why I said in some I'm disciplined, but I've seen people that are so disciplined, it looks exhausting. It's like,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So, I'm just like, what was extraordinary was the fact that my dad was getting to what Alzheimer's brought to the table for him while he was still alive and taking his breath and still learning and growing and still incarnate. He got to cry.
Oh, wow.
He got to curse. He got to do things that, as Dick Hensley, the man, the preacher, the coach, that he never ever allowed himself to do. He was mean, and my dad wasn't like that, and so I'm like, every experience counts. Everything is of value. And so I would try to just say to them, relax and kind of give up this whole idea that he's suffering because you're suffering watching him. Those are two very different things.
Yeah, my mom was that way.
Let me say that again. Okay. Just because the person you're watching is suffering, it's your own suffering that's making the situation that more difficult. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, how many times you hear this? The people that leave this earth, they're not sad. They may be sad for us because we miss them, and we're sad, but they're not sad.
Well, I always describe it to people because they're like, oh my gosh, what was it like leaving the body? I'm like, truthfully, so I'm from Virginia. It gets stinking hot there in the summer. Imagine being out, you're cutting the grass, you're sweating to death, and it's really, 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 really hot. And you go inside, you peel off all your nasty clothes, you leave them by the washing machine, and you go have the best shower of your life. The very last thing you're thinking about in that shower is the dirty clothes. And that's literally what it's like to shed the body. But, when my dad was having his experience, we were in the nursing home one night, and we'd had a tough day because he had sundowner syndrome, So, like this man of God would walk around and drop his pants, and he was,
Right.
all he could do was kind of blah, 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 blah. He could not make a word. It had been months since he
Oh,
spoke.
yeah.
He just shuffled around. And so he'd had kind of a violent day that day. He was physically violent. And so my mother is sitting there, she's 92 now. He was, I guess it was 2012 that he died. So what is that, 8-9 years ago? And so we're sitting in the nursing home with him, and Dad's shuffling around for the 500th time. He's washed his hands, and he would not go down in the bed, because this is what blew my mind. If he went flat, if he laid down, when he could still talk months earlier, he told us that he was afraid that if he laid down, he was going to die. And
Oh,
I'm like,
wow.
wow, this is crazy. A guy dedicates his entire life to teaching people about, the beyond and what it
Yeah.
takes to get there and all this. And he's petrified to go. It like totally failed him in the end when he needed it. It wasn't there. It didn't
Right.
hold water. And I always thought this was fascinating. And so he shuffles around the room, and then he goes over to the bed and he lays down in the bed. And my mom, like, she's like a deer in headlights, man. She looks at me and she's like, is this it? And one of the things I've always been able to do is see the auric field around people. And
Oh,
so
wow.
what it looks like when somebody is leaving a body is not like you'd think, where it was like a dimmer switch turning down. It's quite the
Brightens.
opposite. It's like a fireworks display popping off, because the energy and that life force is
Right.
revving up as it sheds the body, not the other way around. And so I'm looking and I'm like, no fireworks, Mom. I'm like, he's having an event. Something's happening here. And so she's like looking, I'm looking, and Dad goes down in the bed, and all of a sudden he reaches up and he goes, I can see it. Now we nearly pass out, the two of us, because it's the first time he's spoken in months.
Hmm.
And it's crystal clear. And I'm like, well, hey, Dad, what can you see? And he goes, I can see it. And I'm like, what? And he's like, the land beyond the river. And I
Hmm.
was like, wow, what's it like? And he goes, well, it's more beautiful than anything you ever wrote about, sugar. And I'm like, the land beyond the river. So one of my books eventually became The Land Beyond the River. And so I'm like, well, tell us, what do you see? And he goes, Mama. Mama is
Mhm.
there, and she looks so young. And he's just beaming, right? Smiling from ear to ear. And so we sit with that for a second, and then all of a sudden he just gasps, and he's like, oh my gosh. And I said, Dad, what's up? And he goes, Daddy's there. Now, this was huge for my father, because according to my father's criteria as a Christian man,
Right.
he had worried his entire life, because
He
he
wouldn't be in
knew
heaven.
beyond a shadow of a doubt his dad did not make it to the land beyond the river, right?
Right.
So he is looking, and he's like, he's in utter disbelief.
Hmm.
And he just is, just relishing in that moment. And he turns to my mom and he says, Helen, I've had it wrong all along.
Wow.
You can't mess this thing up. Everybody's welcome here. And it was the most truthfully important, because, it's one thing when you have your own near-death experience and you do it, but when you watch someone who has parked that knowing
Mhm.
in order to experience life in a certain way, under a certain criteria, with certain rules, and you see them remember it, it changed me forever. It was
Yeah,
just,
that's pretty powerful.
it was the closest thing on earth that ever took me back to that feeling again, because again, as we know, that death, that vibe, it's all just a feeling.
Right.
And that's all
Wow.
that matters. Some people, I have the most extraordinary recall of what happened in the near death event. I could tell you for hours and hours and hours. We could sit and chat about what happened and all the detail. And then there are other people who come back and they're like, I don't know, ma'am, it was just love and light.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which one of them is more important or valid? They're exactly the same.
Right.
They're just two different experiences of the same thing. And all that really matters when you come back from that is that feeling, that knowing. And this is why some people, depending on where they had come to in their own lives, some people suffer after having the near death
Right.
experience because they remember that feeling. And the feeling, it's a place that I said in one of my books that it was a place that's so beautiful that it hurts to remember.
Mm.
And I don't let myself sit for too long on the experience because it does hurt to remember. The feeling is so powerful and overwhelming, and I know it's there and it's always going to be there waiting for me. So that's why I am like 90, 24/7, because I am going to do what I came back to do, and I'm
Right.
going to have a good time doing it. And I don't do it with fear of, personal injury, or like I don't do stupid stuff, but
Right.
I had one of my patients in today who was complaining about, oh, Jenny, I'm just in pain every day when I wake up. And I said, yeah, try breaking your neck and dying. I'm in pain every day too.
Right.
But when I wake up, I ask myself one question: is the pain I'm in bigger than what I want to accomplish today?
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
answer is always no.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've been going to and you're a chiropractor, which
Mhm.
I love chiropractors. I've been going since I was 17. Neck, back, lower back, constantly hurt. In fact, the psychic once told me because a lot of times they're like, we don't even know why my back hurts, but it's probably a past life thing. But um, I feel the same way. I could sit there and complain to everybody and anybody that listen, like, oh, my back hurts. Oh, this hurts. Oh my God. But I choose to just live my life and just keep going because eventually my body may not be able to keep going and keep moving because of just, age. And
Exactly.
yeah, so for me, until that happens, I'm going to just keep moving.
Hmm.
And when we have about, God, I hate to say it, only 8 minutes left. So this is going to be a part two. I know we're going to do a part two, but after your accident, you got into chiropractor and also your healing abilities. What in your new book, understanding is the new healing.
Hmm.
Can you talk about the healing part? About what enhanced after the accident, and also it's not when a lot of people think healing could be like an illness, which
Hmm.
might be you might touched on, or pain, but is this also healing of spirit, healing of soul, well, soul's never really, but healing of spirit. what what changed in you after the accident when it comes to the healing?
Well, I came back with this ability to basically, it's like downloading a hard drive. I could touch somebody now. I don't have to touch anybody. I can do it from wherever and whenever.
Right.
It's just because strictly you're doing it all the time, and you
Right.
become really good at it. It's
Right.
the same as if you sing all the time, you're going to become a good singer. And I just happen to work with frequency this way. And anybody's like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy," and I'm like, "Is it crazy that you can pick up your cell phone and call me from wherever you are,
Right.
and I can receive that call instantaneously? Why is this crazy?"
Mm-hmm.
It's literally a manipulation of frequency that's allowing that to happen. Um, but we like to pick and choose what we think is nuts or not. Um, so for me, it was that capacity to download somebody's hard drive, and it was like going back into their biography in order to change their biology.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never go in. That's what's so cool about being able to see these things is I'd never go in and attempt to um, change something just because it's painful or difficult for the individual, because sometimes some people are ill because they need to be ill. I've had a lot of people who, one thing I've learned over the years is everybody doesn't want to be well,
Right.
and people get so mad when I say that, and I'm like, hey, you go do what I do for a living for a little while and you will know very quickly everybody doesn't want to be well. Some people have great benefits from being ill. I get 500 emails a day, and I got one from somebody the other day going, I cannot get my head around the fact that you put a video on Facebook, and we're laughing so hard because you had an allergy attack in the middle of a garden center, and that the people like scattered like cockroaches because I'm like sneezing. All of a sudden, it's like COVID alert,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
I was howling when I got back to my car. It was so funny, like you couldn't make it up. And she's like, I can't get my head around the fact how you could profess to be a healer and that you're sick with something as simple and common as allergies. And I'm like, really? Do you know? And so she got a shock because I answered back, I actually love getting sick. And
Mm.
she's like, what? And I'm like, I enjoy illness. I am a workaholic. I am going nonstop, and I don't really have a very strong start stop button.
Right,
Um,
right.
some of that, from breaking my neck, I damaged my vagus nerve.
Oh.
And so, that's I'm writing a book eventually in the next year or two called Viva Lost Vegas. And so, that vagus nerve has an awful lot to do with the fact that your body knows when to start and stop something. And so I'm not super good at that. And so illness is a wonderful barometer for me when I'm getting out of kilter. And so, like, why would I wish that away?
Right.
And so, that's very hard for people to understand, if they haven't experienced life that way. But, so my main objective is not just about getting rid of something. Some of my greatest healing moments have been assisting people through the death process.
Yeah.
Playing Angel of Death is one of my favorite gigs. And,
And it's not a bad thing. Like I said, I used to look at death differently, actually, until my mother died.
mhm,
And then I felt like it was more merciful, meaning like I felt free along with her, knowing that she's no longer in pain here, because she was also in a nursing home, constant pain. She was all, and I hate to admit this, but she was a woman that liked to be sick.
oh yeah,
Because it brought, and I hate, it brought attention to
attention,
her.
yeah, sure,
And so she, for 20 some years, I don't know how many times I heard she was going to die. And and after like the fifth or sixth time, you're like, okay. I mean, it's like, when she passed away, it took half my heart with her, but it still was a relief, because I no longer saw her trapped in this shell of a body.
right.
And so,
And
yeah.
when you understand how that actually works and how that energy actually doesn't leave you, you realize, of course you're missing the physical presence
Right.
of the individual. But like, my parents were married for over 60 something years.
Right.
And so my mom is having the time of her life. She adored my father.
Yeah.
They were the best of friends. They were always together. But she very clearly realized that there was life for her beyond my father's death.
Right.
And I wrote a book with some friends called Bringing Death to Life. And
Mm.
my mom actually wrote the chapter on the death of a spouse,
Oh,
because she
great.
was the only one amongst us
That had
who
lost a
had
spouse.
actually lost a spouse and could tell this story. And she said, my mom released her first book at Christmas. It's on
Oh,
Amazon,
that's awesome.
His
That is
Own
awesome.
Simple Gift, it's called. She's 92.
Good
She's
for
coming
mama.
to Ireland. She turned 92 a couple of weeks ago, and I gave her a ticket. And they're like, oh my gosh, Helen, you couldn't be getting on a plane in the middle of a global pandemic. And she's like, are you really for real? Like, I've lived 92
Right.
years. I am going.
Right. Right. Well, we have about 3 minutes left. Will you talk about your book? Tell us just a synopsis of what the book's about. And
Okay. Well, what I love about this book is this is a book I always wanted to write, because this is about other people's stories. You get into this business and you're telling your own story and your near death experience and all this. Understanding is the new healing is all of these wonderful interactions that I had. That 5 minutes I was able to step into somebody else's story, and affect change in their lives, and always leave with my life changed.
mm,
And so what's so cool about these, it covers a broad spectrum. They're, past or concurrent lifetimes.
right.
And then the second half of the book is all about just, crazy stuff from aliens to, gosh, you name it, it's all in there. But what's really neat about this, and what I'm so proud, is that this is the first book. You can get it, of course, in paperback, but also on Amazon Audible. It's the first
Oh,
book in their history that is backed by these healing frequencies. And so the healing frequencies and brainwave states correlate to each individual story. So if there's something in the story, not necessarily the exact storyline, but the energy or feeling of the story that is relatable to you, the actual frequencies that can go in and create a cellular change that can that can clean house on a cellular level,
Right.
it becomes an immersive experience for the listener as opposed to just an audible experience.
Right.
And people are healing,
I love
and
it.
so yeah, I'm really, really delighted, just because it's not very often you get to be the first at doing something.
Right.
And
Not these days.
um,
It's
not these days. And it's just it's a culmination of my work, and a very dear friend of mine, Greg Papania, who is a the sound engineer guru sent from God, who allows me to go, hey, guess what, this particular brain tumor sounds like this, and he can just match it.
Hmm.
um and that was it. Everything has a tone. We're all you know just different points on
Right.
the same beam of light.
Right. Well, I appreciate you, and we're gonna have to do a part two because there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to,
Absolutely.
and I love your energy. So
Thank you.
yeah, I love your energy, and by just the way you looked at your death and just life itself, I think it's a testament of what people really do see after we're gone, of saying that we don't have to take ourselves so seriously, and we don't have to look at other people other than being different is good. So, and like your dad says, I got it wrong all along. So I love that. That touched me.
Everybody's welcome here.
Yeah, everybody's welcome here. So, well, thank you so much. You can go to maryhelenhensley.com and check out her website. Please pick her book up. And if once I hope you do some book sightings. So if you can, hopefully you can put them up on your website if you do. And we really appreciate you coming in and being part of the Truth Be Told.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And we appreciate everybody for joining us, and we hope you guys had a great time. Please reach out if you have any comments or questions. Let us know. Share this show. Like us on YouTube, Facebook, and go to all of our podcast downloads, iHeart, Apple. The list goes on and on and on. Until next time, I'm Tony Sweet for Truth Be Told. Take care. Bye-bye.